Hello, thank you so much for inviting me to come speak today and share my experience from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation point of view. So my name is Ashley Farley. I'm an Associate Officer for Knowledge and Research Services, and I manage the open access policy that we have and our associated initiatives. So I won't bore you with too much of the policy side, but I want to do some context setting first and then talk a little bit more about the future. And I'm quite glad to be going last, actually, because Rachel and Keith have done such an excellent job of kind of setting up with some of the points that I would like to make as well. So first off, why is open access important to the foundation? And, we truly believe that by freely sharing the high-quality research that we fund, as soon as it's available, we and our other partners can develop more efficient and effective strategies to tackle the problems that we're trying to solve. We have a belief of all lives have equal value, and I believe that can even be threaded into when we talk about access to information and whose voices are heard and who gets to participate in this ecosystem. But specifically, what does open access mean to the foundation? So this is a breakdown of our policy that we've had since January 1st, 2015. It's an actual clause in all of our grant agreements. Of course, the publications, and this is strictly in peer-reviewed journals at this point, must be on open access terms, so no paywall. We do require only a CC BY license. The publication must be immediately available, meaning no embargo. And then the trickier one, which we are still doing a lot of work on, is that the underlying data should be openly available as well. And then just a side note that we are a signatory of Plan S and part of Coalition S, so our policy will be adapting to align more with those principles in the following year. So what are some of the challenges that we see with the existing publishing system? Of course, the first point is just access to information. As a somewhat large organization, we have about 2,000 employees. We struggle with access to information as well, and our program staff need this information to be able to make informed decisions when grant making. So we're not just talking about access in the global south, but just in general, and also hearing back from our grantees that they struggle with access as well. Long delays in publication, the biases and conflicts that can come from kind of a closed system, lack of data access supporting the findings. It's very hard to maybe verify and reuse. And a lot of research is never published or kind of published in a traditional manner. And there's been significant research waste, which has been much more talked about in the last couple of years, which is great. And so one of the initiatives that we've kicked off with a company publisher you probably know, F1000, is Gates Open Research, and I'm going to talk a bit about the model and our experience. I'm sure you are aware with how they work, but I'll try to infuse some of our takeaways and experiences to make it a bit more interesting for you. So this is what it looks like. We followed in the footsteps of Wellcome Trust, so they launched Welcome Open Research first. So this is a Gates Foundation branded innovative publishing platform, and now there have been, I think, like 8 or 10 additional funders that basically are kind of white labeling this process. And it's not only taught us a lot, but it's been a really fantastic resource for our grantees to publish in. So how does it work? So the idea is that the grantee, and the idea too is that there are grantees, so we've already vetted them in some manner. We've given them funding. We trust their work. So they do have to be a grantee in order to publish on the platform. And so they submit whatever they think they want to share with the community, what they want to publish. We are trying to encourage different types of publications at this point, not just a traditional research article, but null hypotheses, data notes, maybe smaller publications, just getting all of that information that they want to share with our community out there. And it goes through a quick 7-day kind of quality check, and then it enters into fully transparent peer review. And then they make sure that there's access to that source data and versioning and all that, and we'll take a closer look as we go. So here's an example of what an article looks like. You can see there's usage data from the very beginning. It's immediately citable. We make sure that it's very clear that it's not been peer-reviewed and it's awaiting peer review. And we have a criteria set for, and it's author-led peer review, and there's certain criteria that the editorial team will make sure that those peer reviewers meet the criteria. And all the peer-reviewed reports are named, they're open, they're citable, readable, which has been really great to see that everyone who gets credit for the report, so a lot of times it could be early career researchers or postdocs conducting the peer review, and they never really get any credit. So here you can name who worked on it, and it's citable as well. We've seen some really extensive, thoughtful peer reviews that are valuable, as well as the article, and so those can be cited elsewhere as well. And then you can see here kind of the different versioning. So there was a version 1. One peer reviewer had some concerns, and so the original authors produced a second version. And this is a great example. So this article came out in August of last year, and it was a big paper. The author wanted to try kind of a different model. We've been working hard internally and with our grantees to really socialize this idea and to get Gates Open Research on the tops of everybody's minds. And so instead of maybe traditionally publishing it in a traditional way, the author decided that they wanted to get the information out there and quickly. And this ended up being a really great example of what a type of model can do for innovation and speeding up the whole kind of research process itself. So within a couple days, it was picked up by The Guardian, which then had kind of a cascade effect of New York Times and major news publications covering this report. It hadn't even started the peer review process yet. We use Altmetrics to track our publications, so you're able to see quite a lot of buzz in the first few days, and whereas in a typical publication it would have been behind a closed box of the editorial review, and so this was already out there having impact. And it's yes, okay, sorry. So I was just curious, after a couple months, I went to look and see if there are any citations to it yet, once it passed its kind of final peer review process. So there's it has to be either 2 checks as for accepted, or 1 check and 2 kind of question marks, which means accepted with reservations. Overall, I've seen with our authors and grantees that even if it passes the so-called approval in order to be indexed in PubMed Central and other indexing sites, that the authors want to improve it. They really want to make sure that their version of record is as strong as it can be. And so we've seen some articles that have gone through 3 or 4 different versions, and everything that's been changed is transparent. You're able to see it. So it changes the idea of this article as kind of being a process that's not seen by anybody else besides the individuals involved, into being very transparent, and a whole conversation unfolds in a really interesting way in a lot of these articles that benefits the whole process and the research itself, and it's like a living document instead of kind of a one and done, publish it, it's on my CV and I move on. So it was already being cited pretty early on, and then I noticed out of these citations, 2 of them are preprints themselves. When we think about the goal of openness and speeding up the publication process, what is the evidence there that this is actually happening and that there's benefit to it? So I was excited to see that the paper is already being cited and built upon within just the first couple of months of it being publicly available. But that's for peer-reviewed work, and at the Foundation, I've discovered since launching this project and being involved with our open access policy and really having in-depth conversations with our program staff and grantees as to what do the research outputs actually look like. I mean, we fund $4.7 billion a year, but what do we get out of that? What does that look like? And a lot of the stuff that is produced isn't a traditional article or aren't things that most publishers would find to fit the kind of their editorial scope. And So we've been thinking about, and we've had discussions earlier today, which is great, of thinking of what do these different outputs look like and how do we make sure they're trackable and shareable. And one way that we've been experimenting with this, with Gates Open Research and F1000, is creating these things called gateways and documents, or slides or posters. Not the most exciting name, but it's been a really great experience to kind of soft launch this within the foundation and see what the interest is and what people think about publishing things that don't end up being peer-reviewed, which I know could be kind of a scary concept, but I truly believe that a lot of the research community can be self-correcting, and there's an option to do this here as well as on the peer-reviewed side of the platform as well. So we've been creating these gateways which either a specific team or project can set up. So we've done it with our water, sanitation, and hygiene. They were our first pilot group. And then for conferences, so conferences can be a great way to share information. There's usually things that are cutting edge. People spend a lot of time creating presentations and posters and slides and all this great content that is often lost after the conference is over. And so we're trying to think of a way to really obtain that information and make it openly available for as long as possible. So, and this is also another way that I've been working with researchers to highlight their own work. So each page will have a lot of descriptions about what the research is trying to accomplish, what are the things that they're working on. They can link out to other websites. There are gateway advisors, and we have a whole stellar advisory board for Gates Open Research, and then each gateway can kind of set up their own mini advisory board as well, which is a great way to give researchers visibility and help them talk about their work. So what do these actually look like? Unfortunately, right now, they're all in PDF form, but definitely recognize the limitations in that, and so we are thinking of how to change that in the future to make these more machine readable. So the first thing is that they're not peer-reviewed. They're definitely labeled as not being peer-reviewed, so we want to make that very clear. We still collect usage metrics, make sure there's a lot of associated metadata, which is great, especially for things like conference posters and presentations. You can see where was that presented, and you can make that connection. Everything's assigned to DOI. And then we connect everything to our specific Gates grants and numbers. So moving on for that and talking more in big picture and why, I think a lot why we haven't really reached this ideal state of openness and transformation in the research landscape. And I think there's still a lot of fear in that change. And one way that I think we, especially from a foundation perspective, can address that is building trust. And it takes a lot of trust in all the different aspects of the system. I mean, when I started, and I'm a librarian by training and degree, I've worked in both academic and public libraries my whole career, as I didn't truly understand a lot of the depths of the publishing system, and this is something that I think researchers, funders, librarians, everyone can be part of the conversation to learn more about what it actually takes. And in being part of Gates Open Research, I've learned this now firsthand of all the things that happen behind the scenes. That it takes, it's not just putting like a blog up or like here's this research and there you go. There is a lot of work behind the scenes that's valuable and is really important for that integrity and quality of the research. And I think if all the stakeholders had more transparency into what that looked like for publishers and how we can help you and we can all be a part of it, I think our conversations would move forward in a much more productive manner. And I definitely have a lot more respect now for the system and what it takes. And it's been great partnering with F1000 because I've learned a lot about what editors do and kind of how the editorial side of things looks and the technology behind it. And then And building Gates Open Research, I've then asked our program staff and grantees to put a lot of trust in me and the system and the policy itself. Of course, career advancement is a big topic. It's very important to our research, and I definitely get it. So when we're saying, Nature and Science aren't compliant with our policy, you can't publish there, they're putting a lot of trust in us that we are working to change the system to make sure that there is not going to be no safety net, but below them as they work on their career and they advance. And so that's really important to me. And I also recognize the privilege of being at the foundation, and that the foundation is able to pay for our grantees to be able to publish open access, so we support that. It doesn't come out of their grant budget, but I recognize that a lot of foundations can't do that, a lot of institutions can't. So I hope that we think more about trust in these systems as we move forward. And being conscious of time, I'm going to talk a little bit just about the future, which I think has been covered well today, which is really exciting. I'm somebody who likes to be very action-oriented and think ahead. I think we've spent a lot of time over the last years, and especially people who have come before me in the open access community, is that we recognize where a lot of the pain points and the issues are, but what are we going to do to move forward to address them? And I think the future is going to look very different from what we see now. So when we talk about what does an article look like? What will a journal look like? I don't think they're going to look like they do now. Way that I see researchers starting to do, like I still do kind of old school literature reviews, but those are changing drastically. And researchers are very interested in seeing data first, and then maybe seeing the methods and the conclusions. But I think the way that we search and discover and ask and answer questions is going to change dramatically, and we really should think outside of the box. And then my final note, this is one of my favorite slides. And I know right now, this change is pretty uncomfortable, but I think if we stick with it, there'll be a light at the end of the tunnel, and the research ecosystem will be so much better for it in the long run. Thank you very much, and I look forward to questions.